moderating discussion. Before I turn it over to today's host, Chairman Langworthy, I just want to give you a brief rundown of today's event for those of you who haven't joined us before. First, you'll be welcomed by Chairman Langworthy, who will then turn it over to our two special guests today, Nicole Malliotakis and Claudia Tenney, who will give a brief presentation and answer some questions from the chairman. So in the second part of the event, we'll turn it over to the Q&A to all of you in the audience. And you can ask your question one of two ways. If you would like to be on camera, you can use the raise your hand function. And if you prefer not to be on camera, you can just type it into the Q&A box. So that's raise your hand function if you want to be on camera. And if you don't, you can type it into the Q&A box and it will be read aloud. Please feel free to get your questions into the queue at any point during today's discussion, and we will do our best to get through as many as possible. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Chairman Langworthy. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Jessica, and thank you to everyone for taking time out of their busy schedules to be with us again this week. I mean, we have been going strong for going on, I think, 9 weeks now, doing these video town halls to show you what's going on in the Republican Party. And we've had some really great forums, great participation, and excellent guests, and today is no exception. As New York State continues to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic and progress through the reopening phase, as slow as they might be, and then as civil unrest and protesting and riots have subsided a little bit, it's time to turn our attention back to another critical issue, and that's what's going on in Washington and how Republicans can take back the majority in the U.S. House of Representatives. Nancy Pelosi and her majority have spent the last year and a half attempting to really put the government in gridlock, and all the progress that President Trump has made to build a stronger and more secure America, they've wasted everyone's time and millions of tax dollars with their failed impeachment attempt, and they continue to try to destroy everything our country stands for and replace it with socialism, anarchy, and open borders. It's clear that the far left will say and do anything to force their radical agenda on the American people, and we need to take this opportunity in November to win back the majority in the House of Representatives and fire Nancy Pelosi and the squad. And that's why I'm very excited to have two of our congressional candidates here for this week's video town hall, which will help us accomplish this mission. We have a lot of seats in New York that are on the board, per se. That's the races in America that will determine the majority of the House of Representatives. These are two seats that slipped away from us in 2018. And we are poised and ready, and we have the partnership from President Trump to bring these seats back into Republican hands. I've personally discussed both of these candidates with him, and he strongly endorsed both of them. And I joined President Trump in endorsing both Claudia Tenney and Nicole Malliotakis. Claudia was elected to Congress in November 2016 to represent New York's 22nd Congressional District. Now, this district encompasses 8 counties in upstate New York. It's a very wide district that incorporates a good chunk of the middle of our state, from the Utica, Rome area, almost to the suburbs of Syracuse, and then down to the Binghamton area. Prior to her election in Congress, Claudia represented portions of the 22nd District for 6 years in the New York State Assembly. And whether it was in Albany or Washington, Claudia has always been a staunch advocate for her region, for the taxpayers of upstate New York, and the Second Amendment. Welcome our candidate for New York 22, Claudia Tenney.
Thank you, Chairman Langworthy, and also to Assemblywoman Nicole Malliotakis. We came in the same class in the Assembly in 2010, which was a great year for Republicans, by the way. When Nicole and I served our first year, there were 51 Republicans in the Assembly, and that was the first time we were able to bring the Democrats down to double digits and having only 99, and sadly we've lost that over time. But we need to rebuild, and I want to just say thank you to you for stepping up and taking the lead in this really challenging year and state for our community. But I feel like we're at a crossroads. This country is, really on the brink of turning to socialism, to anarchy, as you described. I mean, who would ever think in the modern day United States that a great city like Seattle would be taken over by an autonomous zone? An autonomous zone that is, a mockery to the Democrats, and just, a perfect analogy to how their failed leadership. They don't stand up for the rights of Americans. They don't stand up for freedom and property rights. Think of all the people. You can just set up an autonomous zone in the middle of a great city and deny the residents there their own ability to get resources from the government that they elected, and the Democrats just sit idly by. We're seeing incredibly terrible bills coming in the House. I served in the 115th Congress, and I know a lot of you I know who will be on the call, but that was one of the best years we've had on the Republican side in decades. We did a lot. We finally got the tax reform done. It wasn't perfect for especially people in wealthy areas, but in New York's 22nd district, where I live, actually 95% of the people got a tax cut. It was really helpful for our small business community, and we at least fought to get the state and local tax deduction to $10,000. We doubled the child care credit. We worked on with Ivanka Trump and Tim Scott on that. And another thing that we worked on as well was to add a dependent care credit, which means people like me who raising my son as a single parent and taking care of my parents who happen to live across the street. So we were able to benefit from that and really focused on middle class benefits. We also preserved the historic tax credit. All this was taken out in the first iteration of the bill, where every single Republican member and every member of the House voted against it. We were able to work with the president and get some of these things back. And I know we still need to do more work, but we got a great economy. We reduced unnecessary regulations. You know, a lot of bills got done, a lot of important work got done, which caused the great economy that we created that was knocked down by this terrible COVID virus. So I think that the choice is clear now. We have a group of Republicans who showed leadership. Were clouded. Our entire term was with the president was clouded by this Mueller report and Russia collusion and you name it. This president has faced everything, as all of us had. And in 2018, we had a very narrow loss. My district lost, and I would argue, and I think it was not a Trump district in 2018. I got more votes in 2016 when I won than my opponent got in 2018. And so we can see that our Republicans were not coming out in big numbers. The Democrats had a presidential turnout year in an off year. They had the resist movement, indivisible. My district in New York's 22nd district was the most densely purchased ad buy in the entire nation. There were more ads placed by the Democrats, more money based on actual value in my district. And the biggest ground game in the entire nation was in my district, in John Fasso's district, which we sadly lost as well. Right there, they came right in from New York City and around the country to really focus. So we need to be on top of this as Republicans. We need to fight. We need to have a ground game. We need to continue to get out there and set the record straight. The Democrats are proving they can't lead. President Trump, in all the clutter, he still continues to come out. Recently, just did an executive order, kind of calming everyone down on some of the police issues. But you know, they're not going to calm down, and we need to stand up and be strong and talk about our values. Right now, our district is looking really great. I mean, Nicole and I both have a primary next week, but I don't think it's going to be of consequence for either one of us. But we still have to fight. We still have to use resources. And I'm using this primary opportunity to really get our message out before the Democrats bombard us with their ad campaign, which is certainly coming the day after primary day. The good news is we're doing well fundraising. We obviously need to raise a lot more. My opponent has literally millions and millions of dollars just for voting to impeach the president, which is his single biggest negative. When we do polling, people are really upset. He said he wasn't going to impeach the president, and he went in and impeached the president. The CLF, which is the non-political arm, theoretically, or the non-NRCC-based arm of the Republican side, is set aside about $2 million for our race. NRCC announced today that almost like $3.3 million is going to be put into our race in the fall. So they're very much behind us. We look like one of the top take-back seats, as is Nicole's. We have to win these seats, or we're going to continue to see chaos. You're going to see socialism. So anyway, I'm sorry, I'm too long. Happy to take questions.
We'll get into all of that and then some. And then our other guest today, Nicole Malliotakis, was elected to the New York State Assembly in November of 2010, and she represents a district spanning the boroughs of Brooklyn and Staten Island. Nicole became a household name in 2017 as the Republican nominee for mayor of the city of New York against Bill de Blasio, the famous, terrible mayor, Bill de Blasio. And she's held the mayor accountable for the city's high property taxes, bloated budget, and status as a sanctuary city. And if there isn't a more pitiful elected official in America than Bill de Blasio, I don't know who that is. And during our mayoral run, she garnered 67% of the vote in the congressional district she's currently running for, the 11th congressional district, which also is Staten Island in Brooklyn. So we have with us Nicole Malliotakis. Welcome.
Hi, how's everyone doing today? I hope you're all healthy and safe, and thank you, Chairman, for inviting me to participate in this. It's great to see my good friend Claudia. As was mentioned, we both got elected to the state legislature together, and hopefully we'll be elected this year to Congress together. I'll say this, I've been serving in the state legislature for 10 years, and I've been in the minority. Even as a minority member, though, we've been effective. We've been able to stop bad policies. We've been able to get things changed. It doesn't happen a lot. It happens every now and then. We have a major victory, and that's why it's so important to have a two-party system. Right now in the state of New York, we only have a one-party rule, the city, state, and in our representation in Washington. And just to point out a couple of the things I've worked on as a legislator, when we talk about holding the Democrats accountable, last year I single-handedly stopped legislation from coming for a vote. It was pulled at the 11th hour on the last day of session from the agenda. It had already passed the state Senate, and it was a bill that would have automatically registered everyone who came for a driver's license to vote, even if they were non-citizens. It would just automatically took their application and forwarded that information to the Board of Elections and registered them to vote. Makes no sense. If you come with a foreign passport, why would you automatically send this information? I exposed what the bill did, the flaws in the language. It was taken off the agenda. We're able to preserve the integrity of our elections. Also, when it comes to like the bail law that took effect in April, again, under one-party rule, I led the fight against it. I led the fight to fix it. Come July 1st, there's going to be a number of changes to that broken law. It's not perfect, but significant changes, like adding to the list of crimes in which a judge still has discretion to set bail for an individual, things like criminally negligent homicide, things like vehicular manslaughter, strangulation. Think about that. I mean, these are crimes that the Democrats were saying, release with no bail. It really is chaotic. In fact, rioting, arson, and some other crimes that just took place here in the city in the last couple of weeks are also released without bail. And when an individual, I'm sure you all remember the story about the bank robber who was arrested time and again, committed 6 robberies in a row, is still released. That's not going to happen anymore come July 1st, thanks to myself and my colleagues in the Assembly that really made a lot of noise and embarrassed the Democrats to do the right thing. In addition to that, holding Mayor Bill de Blasio accountable, as was mentioned, I wrote to the U.S. Justice Department to get them to stop the mayor from proceeding with bringing heroin injection centers to our city. As of now, he's forgotten that plan since I made such a strong attempt to have him looked at closely, and obviously it's a violation of federal law. And then when it comes to sanctuary cities, I've been the mayor's most vocal critic when it comes to protecting individuals who are in this country illegally and committing crimes. We were able to push back and get the mayor to at least now deport individuals who commit sex crimes, like patronizing a child for prostitution or sex abuse or forcible touching. So those are some of the successes we've had in the minority. I want to go to Washington now and hopefully be in the majority because I do believe New York City needs to have one Republican voice. It is so critical that this city is represented with at least one Republican voice, and also we need to help Lee Zeldin and Lee Stefanik and the others who are really fighting the fight, and they just need more assistance. And so I look forward to that. I just want to say the reason I first got into this campaign was because I'm the daughter of a Cuban refugee. And when I see people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez trying to move our nation more towards socialism, I'm personally offended by it, and I want to fight back against it. Now, this race is even more critical because we are coming out of this COVID crisis. Our economy, particularly here in New York, is really hurting. We need people who are going to help the president not only recover our economy, but restore American jobs and also look at our healthcare system so we are better prepared for the future. So thank you, Chairman, and I'm happy to take questions as well.
Well, very good. Thank you both for being here. And I can't support these two candidates enough. I've known them for years. Even in my service as county chair, I remember the first time meeting both of you when you traveled to Buffalo on one of your field hearings for the assembly, and we got a chance to visit and catch up. And then last year, right after I was elected state chairman, the three of us were part of a delegation traveling to Israel to go and see things firsthand and learn more about the Israeli United States relationship. And when you get to travel with people, you get to know them quite well, spending 4 or 5 days together. And it was really a pleasure. And you hear the passion that they both bring to public service. They put their heart into this, and they did it in the assembly. Claudia's done it in Congress. I mean, I remember seeing her the time I went to the State of the Union address, just work in the halls of Congress. You would have thought she was in Congress for 10 years, the way she owned the place, but she was a freshman. And that is, that New York spirit. We need to strengthen the Republican Party, elect these two strong women to Congress, and we're going to get into we'll get right into the issue of the topic of the majority. Many people think New York is a dark blue state. We don't matter. I will tell you that Kevin McCarthy, the leader of the Republicans in the Congress, our president, Donald Trump, he understands full well how much the New York congressional delegation matters. I remember being with him the day after the impeachment inquiry was passed, and he made it abundantly clear what my mission had to be for the year 2020, which is, we may not be grabbing the electoral votes of the state of New York, but we're going to get back those seats in Congress that slipped away from us. So these are two of those examples. We need to flip 17 seats to elect a new Republican majority and fire Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House. Tell us, both what you think is the importance of bringing back the House and what our chances are of being victorious come November.
Well, I don't know who you want to start first, so I guess I'll jump
right in. Neither of you are shy.
Well, I'll say this. I'll say that getting the majority back is critically important, because as I left off in my last statement, we are now coming out of what has been a crisis for our country, and for better or for worse, it has had serious changes that we are now going to be facing as a nation. Well, one of those things that I think is really problematic is the economic losses that we've suffered as a nation. But the positive news is that the trend is now in the right direction, where in the last jobs report it was expected to be a 20% unemployment, but as a matter of fact, it had gone down a percentage point, which left us around 13.5%. And with that, it's showing that nationally, outside of New York, of course, we're seeing that jobs have come back, that people are starting to reopen their economies, and they're moving forward, which was so critically important. And we have to credit the president for being strong in pushing to reopen wisely. Everyone wants to put public health first, but there needs to be a balance here in terms of how we do it, not like what the mayor and the governor have been doing here, which I've been very vocal against. As a matter of fact, after this, I'll be on Neil Kudo on Fox Business, if anyone's by TV at 1:40, talking just about this issue and how they are being really not, these small businesses that we have in the city are struggling immensely, how we really need to put the plan out there so they understand and can coordinate their reopening plans, for restaurants needing to hire people and bring them in, and also order food and supplies. They can't wait till Monday to tell them that you can now open outdoor dining. With that said, though, when we see the majority right now, we have a very interesting group there that's in power. When you look at the Financial Services Committee, Maxine Waters is the chair. You have 3 out of the 4 squad members sitting on that committee, which has such an impact on our economy, the financial industry, which is right here in New York, and as well as the future of capitalism. And at the end of the day, do we really want socialists in control of rebuilding our economy and creating jobs, in charge of policies that affect the financial sector, The answer is really no. And I think that is really the most important thing, the most important reason why we can't have people who are just going to serve as impediments every step of the way as the president looks to rebuild our economy and get back to those pre-COVID numbers, which are really incredible. And that's why we need to have a majority that'll work with him, not look for every opportunity to impede him and take him down. Now, I just want to say one thing about my district. This district is extremely winnable. It's been New York City's only Republican voice historically for 30 years. We lost the seat, Dan Donovan lost the seat in 2018. President Trump won it by 10%. I won it in the mayor's race with 67% of the vote. So we feel really great. As long as we have the resources going into November, we're going to win this election, and New York City will once again have a voice, hopefully something that perhaps may sit on the Financial Services Committee and be a counter view to AOC.
Well, it's critically important, as state chairman, I believe we need a federal voice from New York City. I think as a party, we owe it to the taxpayers in the state of New York to send someone that represents the people of the city of New York to Congress that represents our values. So, we're excited about everything we do campaign raise. Claudia, what's your take on the majority?
Well, I think, first of all, there's two ways you can break this down. There's New York, and then there's the rest of the country, and even California. First of all, as we all know, New York is two different worlds. There's New York City, there's the big cities, and then there's the rest of us. And I think my district actually, Mitt Romney won this district by 1 point. President Trump won it by 15 in a big turnout year. A lot of the votes that I get and a lot of the votes that the president is going to get are not necessarily all Republicans. They are people who are independent. They're conservative Democrats who care about their gun rights, who care about their small businesses, and they feel like the left has just gone so far left. The Democratic Party's not providing them with any leadership. And in New York particularly, we are seeing the disaster in Albany, and Nicole alluded to those in the beginning, the terrible bail law, the late-term abortion bill that finally passed. All those things that have passed in the Assembly for decades finally got to be law because we lost the state Senate, which is another critical component to this. So I think that people are also seeing that as a backlash. In terms of the majority across the rest of the nation, I think it was very significant that Mike Garcia won that California special election, and he won it handily. It wasn't like a close race. Now, that seat had been held by a Republican prior, but someone that was very well known, someone that was just very narrowly edged out in that race, but it had never been taken back by a Republican. So the fact that we can get our resources, fight the vote harvesting and the illegal manipulation of our voter system that the Democrats engaged in California, well, it's technically not illegal there, but we're heading that direction in New York with the mail-in votes, the attempt to try to eliminate voter ID, which we already have. We don't have voter ID requirements in New York. So I think if we can stay on top of the intent to commit the voter fraud across the nation in various areas, and we go in and make the case for the economic recovery, because truthfully, as Nicole, I'm a small business owner. My family business was founded in this district in 1946. We were a printing company and a newspaper. Now we're a pharmaceutical packaging industry. I was the publisher of our newspaper, which we sold thankfully in 2004, as we can see the newspaper business kind of declining. But I think we can do it with an economic message, with a message of sanity and common sense, and supporting the president. And I think you're seeing, even through all this clutter, I think you're seeing people kind of going, all right, enough is enough. We have got to get on track. My district is going to be very, very winnable. You're going to, in a normal presidential turnout year, we should win pretty easily. But it's never going to be easy. We need the resources on the ground. The Democrats don't give up easily. They fight. And we need to fight as Republicans. We need to stand up and continue. We have to fight for every single seat. We can do it. We might even be able to get more than 17 seats. But each one is going to be a hard slog. We're going to have to work really hard. Nicole is a very good campaigner. She's a hard worker. I've always been able to win by being a grassroots player. So I think a lot of grassroots emphasis that we need to do on the ground, getting the president back out. He's doing the rallies. He's getting our base excited again. I think that's going to be a big help to us. And I think you're going to see some good results in the fall. If we stay on track, don't make any unforced errors, keep the president's Twitter on task, So I think it's going to be a better year than people think. I think the Democrats, if they continue to overplay their hand and Joe Biden is their nominee, who I don't think excites the base, I think you're going to see a good turnout for us.
You see the enthusiasm for President Trump. I mean, I look at, I mean, one, we constantly get people inquiring, how they can get involved. And, it's great that the digital technology exists to allow people to do it, even if they were in quarantine with the Trump Talk app and in different ways to volunteer for the president's campaign. But to see people 3 days before a rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma, sleeping in the streets to get their position in line, it's remarkable. I can't imagine any other politician of any party drawing that level of devotion and enthusiasm from their supporters. And I think that's a sign of things to come, and that's certainly not showing up in any public opinion polling, that the Democrats seem to be so proud of right now. But they were very proud of that going into the 2016 elections as well. Want to pivot a little bit here and talk about, what has it been like? Both of you declared your campaigns fairly early. You've been out there raising money. You're certainly no stranger to the areas that you represent. But the COVID-19, on top of being tragic and the loss of life, especially in the New York City metro, it has been staggering. But, our lives have basically been, put on hold or put on hiatus. I mean, the pandemic upended the bread and butter ways of campaigning, that's how we started doing these Zoom meetings, because we couldn't do the in-person town halls, and I couldn't go travel around the state, because everything was prohibited. But how have you both handled this new style of campaigning, when going door to door, shaking hands, meeting voters at public events or in-person fundraising is basically gone out the window in the state of New York, at least for the foreseeable?
I'm going to go first, Nicole.
Sure.
Yeah, it's actually it's challenging. I know we're both grassroots type campaigners, and I know because Nicole came and helped me in my primary in 2016, and she was fired up, drove me up and down the district. She saw a lot of cows and a lot of no safe act signs, but anyway, she and a lot of Trump signs, by the way. But it's been difficult. I mean, obviously we have to be more creative. We've done, I think, something like 80,000 Republican calls, and then we've filtered those into calls that I make for voters, and we've been really aggressive. But I'll tell you what's something very interesting that I've noticed. I have never seen the kind of enthusiasm for me personally ever in any race I've ever run, because I think that I've just had so much spent against me that people just are exasperated. They've had time to read things and really kind of pay attention, especially our Republican voters. So we're seeing people oh really, this stuff, anytime anything comes out, they feel like the Brindisi lied to them. He said he wasn't going to impeach the president. That's who's my opponent, and he did. And one thing I found really interesting, we did a lot of door-to-door canvassing, so we can't actually go to doors and do surveys or to talk to people. But what I was doing is going through neighborhoods, and obviously there's no events. Our fire departments can't hold events, which is hurting them. Their fundraisers, their parades, their field days. This is really impacting rural New York, really significantly, especially organizations like that. But as I go door to door, you kind of just walk down a street, and because everyone's home, they see you. People are, who's walking down the street? And I've talked to more people 6 feet, 10 feet away on their driveway because they want to come down and say hello. And, we just give them our door knocker, our door hanger, and we talk to them about the issues. And I find the one thing that I think is people are concerned really for the first time about where this country is going, and they're really concerned about their safety. And I don't know about Nicole, but I have heard this over and over, whether it's from people who are donors, people on the phone, or people at the doors. They are nervous. I mean, one guy said to me, I have 6 grandchildren that are coming for the weekend. This is last week. It was Friday. I was going door to door. And he said, I'm afraid to put my American flag up on my house while my grandchildren are at my house because I'm a target. And this guy was not a hard Republican, so-called. He was sort of a moderate Republican. If people are that worried about their safety, you're going to see certainly they don't want to, maybe because they don't want to get targeted, you're going to see people voting, confidentially and silently to take away, to preserve their rights. I think this is something I've seen a lot of. Just
silent majority is alive and well in this country. It's not showing up in any polling. People don't want to be judged by the liberal elite in the coastal, towers. I mean, they're going to reject it just like they did in 2016. The judgment has got to come to a close. I mean, Nicole, what's it been like in the city? I mean, certainly, Claudia, social distancing can be the way of the world in most of your district, but the density in New York City is really intense. I mean, how do you socially distantly campaign?
Well, I'm fortunate to have a good social media presence, and so a lot of my campaign is revolves around using social media to get a message out, and we have a solid email list, so we've been working with that. I'm personally making phone calls to people in the district instead of going door to door. Probably hit more people actually by making the phone calls, and we've been having great feedback, great responses. We have a great group of volunteers that are really working hard. Anyone on the call that does want to volunteer, you can do it from wherever you want to. It's an app you just download on your phone. You can make phone calls from any place in the country. And so it's really exciting to see the amount of enthusiasm there is to get rid of Max Rose. I think predominantly people are just concerned because he was very dishonest with the electorate. He said he wasn't going to support Nancy Pelosi, then went to Washington voting over 96% of the time with her. He said he wasn't going to impeach the president. In fact, he wrote this beautiful op-ed in the Staten Island Advance, which I agreed with, and then 2 weeks later he turned around and voted for impeachment. And at the end of the day, even on local issues, he said one thing and did something else. So I think people are just seeing the true colors, and I offer an alternative. I am someone who has a record. I've been fighting for the values that are more in line with this district, whether it be my push to get property taxes reevaluated and make it more equitable throughout the city of New York, whether it be pushing to reduce regulations on and speaking of regulations, I think one of the things right now that we're facing is the burdens that are being placed on our small businesses as they attempt to reopen. So that is definitely an issue that I've been talking about a lot. And as a matter of fact, I've led the way to get various sectors back to work. Construction industry, I was very vocal for, which didn't make sense that they were shut down throughout the state when they were working outdoors. Dentistry is another sector that I was influential in getting the governor to resume. Electoral surgeries and our medical industry, I was very vocal about that. And now we're moved on to realtors and restaurants and taking each sector at a time and advocating for what can make their lives easier as they attempt to not only reopen, but really stay alive in a city that has really just abused them, not abused them even before COVID, but now adding, additional regulations and burdens. So those are the issues I'm hearing most about as I'm out there, and people are desperate for a voice that's actually going to defend the taxpayer, the hardworking citizen, the small business owner, and I will be that voice for New York City because they don't have one right now. And I've been that voice proudly in the state legislature. I'll continue to do so. I just wanted, if I could touch on one thing you mentioned, I want to talk about public safety for a minute, because I mentioned some of the fixes that we fought and achieved for the bail law that will take effect in July. But, in addition to that, what we've seen over the last couple of weeks, this attempt to defund our police, to dismantle law enforcement, not only here in the city, but throughout the country, is very frightening. And I think that that's another concern that I hear a lot about. My opponent was among those who was at a defund police rally. They were chanting defund the police, holding up signs that said Blue Lives Murder, and defund the police, things that I don't agree with, and I don't think the majority of this district agrees with either. So, what we're seeing really in this country, and why it's so important, Nick, to take back the majority, is those policies that have been radical or have been maybe restricted to New York are now becoming mainstream within the House of Representatives, right? With Ilhan Omar pushing for dismantling Minneapolis police departments, happening around the country through these various members. That's why it's so important.
And we had an outstanding forum last week with John Cummings, who's running against AOC, as well as Rich Amador, who's a retired trooper running for the state Senate, and it was really a really positive discussion about what's going on, and Senator Fred Akshar as well, what's going on with our police and how they're being basically abused by this movement. You kind of got a little ahead on my script here, but last week we all witnessed Governor Cuomo and Andrea Stewart-Cousins and Carl Hastie attack our law enforcement, and they approved their anti-police agenda. They went and had a big signing ceremony with no social distancing or masks, including the repeal of Section 50A of the state civil rights law. It was a complete insult to the police officers who work hard every single day to keep our community safe. I'd like to get both of your thoughts on New York Democrats' latest efforts, to talk, to whittle away at the rights of our police, to take support away from our police. And do you feel that there's a strong anti-law enforcement movement sweeping through the Democratic Party here in New York State?
You want me to go first?
Sure.
Oh, okay. Thanks. Yeah, it's astounding to watch the governor in action, how easily he is manipulated by this very left-wing forces. Now, people used to say that Cuomo really wanted to keep the Senate Republicans so that he could use them as a foil for all his, I can't get this done. It was his answer to the left, it was the Senate Republicans. Well, now he can't, they're like, he's their runaway train, and he seems to fall in line with whatever they want, which shows he has no, moral compass or base, that they just knock him over. But I am not seeing in my region any kind. I'm seeing more of a support of the police. In fact, I've done a number of Zoom calls with all kinds of groups, with our Republican base, also with farmers, with small business owners. And we have a very strong law enforcement community here. We have a number of our great officers that have been killed in the line of duty throughout this country, throughout our region even. It's funny, my first bill in the Assembly that they finally let me pass was a bill to honor one of our fallen police officers. But I don't see that defund the police. It's coming out of a very, very radical left-wing group out of the cities that are in my district, which are Binghamton and Utica. They're very small, defund the police. Interesting on this whole thing is that my opponent, and I'd be curious to see what Max Rose is doing, he is absolutely silent. He is not saying anything. He's not defending the police. He's not saying, he's just like hiding under a rock, and is really not addressing any issues other than talking about, he's handing out food at the food bank, and he's doing all kinds of things. And another thing that people should understand is they're not in session. They've given up their votes, a proxy vote. That's another thing that's being done. The Democrats have given a proxy vote. Can
you explain proxy voting to everybody?
Right, so they've come up with this scheme where you can actually assign over your vote in the House of Representatives, and someone else can go down and vote that. You can give it to another Democrat, you can give it to Max Rose, you can give it even to a staffer. This is how crazy it is. And through all that we've been through in this country, the Civil War, the War of 1812, the World War I, World War II, pandemics, the Spanish flu, you name it, we have never seen the House of Representatives give up their vote in the form of a proxy. There is no reason you can't safely go down to the House chamber and vote. We already vote, with a card system. So they've done that. And that basically means that it's a mail-in. Like Nancy Pelosi can say, don't bother coming down to Washington. We've taken care of it. We'll vote for you. And it's really that your representative is voting for your district. And it's just, it really is important. And they undermine this whole representative government. But again, this is what's really interesting about it, though, is I see people getting really upset about it more than anything, and they're not really in session. They're not really doing anything. And I was actually in the House chamber during the impeachment vote, and I've been down there. I was there for the State of the Union, some other things. We get, even though people send around these emails that say we get all these privileges, we really don't. But one of them is we do get to be in the House chamber. We have lifetime privileges afterwards. But the sentiment that I got from people down there is that the Democrats are not going to do anything. They're going to block everything and not going to do anything until Election Day because they want to deny the president his right, any chance to get anything done, which they're obstructionists. And I think Nicole alluded to that earlier. They're not interested in getting anything done. They're in a raw lust for power. All this is about is to take over and control everything. And it's really, the media, unfortunately, is mostly complicit with them. Thankfully, we have, our media now. We have social media. We have other, more right-leaning organizations that are actually calling some of these people out. Google and Facebook, you're seeing over the last few days, are totally in the tank with the Democrats and censoring the right-wing voices. So I think we are really in a tough spot, but we have to emphasize as Republicans that they are really doing nothing. We did so much in the 115th Congress. The only good thing about that, them doing nothing, is they can't undo what we did. So a lot of good things are being preserved by doing nothing. But I think this is really important. And my last point on this is the most important legislature in the world. We lead the world on everything, whether it's financial services, based a lot out of New York, on security, on all these major issues. The United States should be a leader. They are squandering their power and everything they do on obstructionism and not really leading us in a very difficult world that we've forgotten about. While we're dealing with rioting and all this craziness that's going on, the world is continuing to revolve around us. China remains a threat. The Middle East are their issues. Now we're seeing some things happening on the India-China border. I mean, the world is going around and we're caught up in this democratic nonsense instead of letting us lead. And I think that needs to be a strong point that everyone makes, and why they should vote for our side and why we're the responsible leaders in this situation. So I think that it's just decadent what they're doing with their power right now, and they don't deserve to keep it.
Nicole, you want to jump in on? I think where we started was
it was about public safety, right? Now, look, what I'll say is that, as I was saying earlier, some of the policies that we really dislike here in New York, and we are very critical of the one-party rule because they pass these things, they're now becoming mainstream within the House of Representatives. And, you look at what Bill de Blasio did, and also Governor Cuomo, in releasing prisoners when we were in the COVID period of the apex, and they released prisoners back into our streets, including, believed murderers and people. Actually, this one guy wasn't even suspected murderer. It was a video of him. Actually, I mean, so there were some serious issues with these release of prisoners back onto our streets. They're obsessed with doing this. And when you think about the bail law that's been in effect, the people who are at Rikers right now are the worst of the worst. You're talking about hardened gang members, murderers, rapists. Those are the people who are at Rikers right now. And the fact that the mayor released, I think it was 2,500 of them, at least 250 of them went out and were rearrested just within the last, month. So that policy now, by the way, in the HEROES Act, when you look at the priorities of the Democrats, they've introduced the HEROES Act. They call it the ZEROES Act. And when you look at the priorities of that, they wanted to take that policy and make it now applied to the federal level, where any prisoner, any convict, these are convicted felons, federal prisons, that are over the age of 50, that they would be released under this provision that they attempted to pass, including murderers, including rapists. When you look at wanting to give stimulus checks to people who are not citizens, people who are in the country illegally, that was another priority of theirs within that package. And then the changes to the election law that Claudia had talked a little bit about this earlier. We don't preserve the integrity of our elections. Look what happened in Venezuela. That's what they do now, right? That's how you move towards socialism, is by tampering with your elections. And the attempts to prohibit any state from having voter ID laws, the attempts to allow ballot harvesting all over the nation, the attempts to allow for same-day voter registration, where you show up at the polling site and register to vote without giving the Board of Elections an opportunity to verify that you're actually eligible, that you're a citizen, that you're 18, that you live in the district in which you're attempting to vote. Think about that and see how they must realize that their policies are so bad, and the only way that they can win is by cheating. To come up with something like that would be so ridiculous. And so those are the priorities that we're seeing coming out of them. And unfortunately, like I said, these were all New York policies. These were New York policies. These are the things we don't like about New York, now mainstream within the House of Representatives because of this new class.
Well, we're going to go to our first question. We have Brian, I believe, with us. Brian, are you on the line?
Yes, I am here. Can you see me?
We can hear you. How are you, Brian?
Now, hopefully you're going to be, there I am.
There we are.
Okay, I'm Brian Ross, New York State Republican Committeeman from Amherst for the last 12 years, and I welcome Assemblywoman Malliotakis because John Katsimatidis always speaks very highly of you, and I know Congresswoman Tenney, very pro-business, pro-jobs Congresswoman. And thank you, Nick Langworthy, for your brains, guts, and courage. I have 4 points. 1, we must defend police and not defund police. Women and men in blue protect us from violence, looting, anarchy. I pray for George Floyd. Rioting and stealing have zero to do with his sad death. Looters disgrace his memory. 2, when elected, please return 100% entertainment tax business deductions to boost restaurants and hotels with more business and jobs. Please also bring back car loan full IRS deductions to bring back auto, steel, coal, and glass industries. 3, please campaign to open upstate New York businesses and schools 100% with masks and distancing immediately. Governor Cuomo should not be a dictator. And 4, please be part of the Donald Trump law and order, pro-jobs, and COVID eradication efforts. I'm very grateful to both of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Well, he's a supporter. But, Brian, longtime supporter, but, talking about a lot of the things that people are out there. We have people, if you're interested in coming on camera and asking a question, use the raise your hand feature. But there's also the Q&A box. I'm going to go to that next.